The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is now. You are tuned in to Moon Channel. I am your host, Moony. This week's topic, the low-stakes social role-playing game, Harvest Moon, Animal Crossing, and the genre they inspired. Modern life is stressful by necessity. One can often feel like a tiny cog in a very large, complex machine. Anxiety has become the collective, default emotion. You have bills to pay, a commute to begin, an early night's sleep that you're ignoring. You have exams coming up, taxes to figure out, and a nerve-wracking sense that you've forgotten to do something. You are constantly on alert, but you crave peace. Therein lies the charm and beauty of games like Animal Crossing. Where life is chaotic, Animal Crossing is peaceful. Where debts in life pile up, debts in Animal Crossing have no interest and no expiry. In the world of Animal Crossing, you say hi to your neighbors every day. You go fishing whenever you want to. You go rummaging for fossils and take long walks on the beach, and nobody tells you that you have to do these things. Tom Nook the Tanuki never comes calling on payday. Mabel the Hedgehog never pressures you to visit. And we visit Mabel's sister Sable because we love her. That having been said, these games are not for everyone. A quick search through Metacritic or Reddit shows us that the fun Animal Crossing offers does not resonate with some people as much as it does with others. And that's okay. Not everyone finds joy in the same places, and that's something to respect. But that said, whether or not you enjoy Animal Crossing, it helps us to understand each other when we understand the reasons why we love certain things. So let's take a look at Animal Crossing, Harvest Moon, and the low-stakes social role-playing genre together. We'll call it a social RPG for short. We'll start with a quick look at history, and then explore the gameplay experience armed with context.
Your attention, please. The Nook Inc. Getaway Package charter flight will soon be arriving at the deserted island.
Imagine for a moment that you've woken up on a beautiful summer day in June of 1997. You got a Nintendo 64 for Christmas, and your buddy across the street owns a PlayStation. You're feeling like playing a new game today, and so you call your friend and pray that nobody is using the internet. Thankfully, you manage to reach your friend. The two of you talk about the games you've been playing. Your friend tells you that he's been playing Final Fantasy VII and that it's the best game he's ever played. You've been playing a lot of Mario Kart lately, but you tell your friend that you're also really looking forward to the upcoming GoldenEye 007, a game you'd read about in the last issue of Nintendo Power. The two of you decide to hang out that day, and so you grab a few cans of Surge Soda and walk to the local Blockbuster Video to check out some new games. As you walk into the Blockbuster, you're feeling giddy already. Posters of the upcoming Space Jam movie line the walls, beckoning you deeper into the enchanted aisles of electronic entertainment. Your buddy wanders into the Sony section to check out the PlayStation games. You find yourself alone in the Nintendo section of the store. You look around for some cool new game releases when something catches the corner of your eye. Surrounded by N64 boxes boasting incredible 3D graphics sits a seemingly brand new box for a game you'd never even seen before. Only this time, the game didn't have incredible 3D graphics. In fact, this game wasn't even on the Nintendo 64. Somehow, a Super Nintendo game had snuck its way onto the Blockbuster shelves. Surely, you think to yourself, this is a mistake. This is 1997, the future, and a Super Nintendo game is old news. Besides, as an avid Nintendo Power reader, you already know everything there is to know about Nintendo releases. So you continue to look around at the N64 games in the aisle, but find yourself drawn back again and again to that Super Nintendo box. Before you realize it, you've picked up the box. You squint your eyes, trying to make out the title of the game through the reflected glare of the fluorescent lights above. Harvest Moon, it says. A game, a role-playing game, about farming. You scoff. Games today have incredible novel-length stories or stunningly interactive 3D worlds, rendered in shocking detail, and the game you're looking at is literally a sprite-based game about owning a farm. So you put it back on the shelf and pick up a copy of Turok Dinosaur Hunter, a game that is sure to impress your friend. But something tugs at you. You end up putting down Turok and picking up Harvest Moon. Turok is the kind of game you'd seen 100 times before, and while you're excited to play it, somehow, Harvest Moon, a game whose like you'd never seen before, feels familiar to you. Something about simply running a farm and making requests and for friends seems comforting. So you grab Turok to rent and slip Harvest Moon under it. You'll dust off the Super Nintendo after your friend leaves later to try it out. As our little story alludes to, Harvest Moon was released in the United States and in Australia, let's not forget our Aussie and Kiwi friends, in 1997. It would later be released in Europe in January of 1998. Now let's be clear, there had been other games with social aspects. Japan had been releasing dating simulator games, more primitive social simulators, as early as the mid-80s, with innocent, cutesy games such as Tenshi Tachi no Gogo, Girl's Garden, and Nakayama Miho no Tokimeki Haisukuru. As an aside, here's a fun fact. Nakayama Miho no Tokimeki Haisukuru was designed by Hironobu Sakaguchi, the creator of the Final Fantasy series, and Yoshio Sakamoto, co-creator of the Metroid series. You can actually see some of the Final Fantasy influence in the user interface design. Oh, and the music for the game was composed by Nobuo Uematsu. Yes, that Nobuo Uematsu. But back to Harvest Moon. While we had seen some primitive dating simulators and even some early The Sims-esque life simulators, at the time of its release there had never been a game quite like Harvest Moon, a game where there isn't a world to save, only people to meet and spend time with, and everything is done at your own pace, in your own time. It is this uniqueness that saved Harvest Moon from complete and total obscurity. In the midst of the 3D gaming boom, Harvest Moon built a little niche for itself thanks to its refreshing take on gaming. From the outset, too, the value of the game was immediately obvious to gamers. In the June 1997 issue of Electronic Gaming Monthly, for example, senior editor Crispin Boyer's favorite game is listed as Harvest Moon. All of this month's fighting games got Chris a little worked up, so the rest of the crew sat him down and forced him to raise cattle in Harvest Moon until he calmed down. In a way, isn't that what the whole genre is about? Moving on to the reviews themselves, senior editor Crispin Boyer again acknowledges that an RPG about farming is a hard sell. Editor Sean calls the game weird, and notes that its graphics look primitive. Senior editor Dan Shu notes that the game is not for everyone, but that it contains a magical quality that may grow on a few people. And Sushi X calls it a guaranteed sleeper hit. Some pretty prescient reviews, if you ask me. Harvest Moon received a commendable 8.5 from Crispin, and otherwise 8s across the board. Although to be fair, it's sitting next to a 9.0 review score for the PlayStation version of Command & Conquer, a real-time strategy game using a controller. Makes you wonder what exactly Tale of the Sun is supposed to be. But speaking of Electronic Gaming Monthly, you just have to miss Dan Shu, Sean Smith, and Crispin Boyer. Gentlemen, wherever you are, I hope you are doing well out there. This moment of respect is for you, the EGM crew. And Dan, I have no idea how you managed to put up with Sushi X, but you are a champion. I also went back to try Harvest Moon for this episode, and even dusted off the old Super Nintendo. The gameplay holds up surprisingly well, and really not all that much has changed in the farm role-playing subgenre since its inception. The game handles like a dream, though the music can get a bit jarring. Now don't get me wrong, the music is charming, it just gets to you a little bit if you start to pay too much attention to it. To this day, foraging for tropical fruits in the summer and mushrooms in the fall, despite its tedium, just makes a person feel happy. They appear in the same spot every day, but it always feels like you found a little secret treasure when you pick them up. Anyhow, armed with context, let's now take a step forward in time. We've gained some understanding of the social RPG's humble roots. How then does a Super Nintendo farm role-playing game lead to Animal Crossing? The very first Animal Crossing was originally released in Japan on April 14th, 2001 on the Nintendo 64. This might be a surprise for those with fond memories of Animal Crossing on GameCube, such as myself. If you recall the more recent in time release of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild on both the Nintendo Wii U and the Nintendo Switch, the situation was similar. Much like Harvest Moon before, Animal Crossing was released at the end of a console cycle. It was released in Japan on the Nintendo 64 and then was updated and re-released on the GameCube that same year in order to reach the widest possible player base. It was the GameCube version that would be localized then and released in North America in 2002, in Australia in 2003, and Europe in 2004. Now by 2002, Harvest Moon had seen relative success, with several sequels including portable releases on the Game Boy, Harvest Moon 64 on the Nintendo 64 console, and Harvest Moon Back to Nature on the PlayStation console. Other games would be released that took features from Harvest Moon as well, but none featured a gameplay loop as parsed and simplified as Animal Crossing. In Harvest Moon, you grow crops, go fishing, raise cattle, talk to villagers, and go foraging. You build up your farm, you find love, you get married, you have children. For a game so treasured for its simplicity, Harvest Moon can at times be rather complicated. That's because Harvest Moon tries to emulate life and creates in that way the complexity of life. But Animal Crossing reduced that formula down to just talking to villagers, foraging, fishing, making money, and building a house. Add in some furniture collection and bug catching, and that's the whole game. Animal Crossing took the social aspects of Harvest Moon, dialed them up a bit, and then subtracted everything else. Nintendo at the time called Animal Crossing a communication game. The result? Another cult classic, or so it appeared at the time. The simplicity of Animal Crossing, its accessibility and low stakes relative even to Harvest Moon, meant that the game could be picked up and enjoyed by anyone. Young children, adults, and even the elderly would all find something to enjoy in Animal Crossing in a way that didn't occur with Harvest Moon, likely due to the latter's more complicated and involved gameplay loop. I adored Animal Crossing and spent long hours in front of the television in relaxed bliss. Sure, like any young man of the time, I enjoyed my action games. At the time, I was quite enamored with StarCraft and Diablo 2. But there was something about the plucky characters, the charming music, the slow pace and low stakes that was soothing to me during what would prove to be a very interesting time in my and many people's lives. You see, Animal Crossing has a funny way of appearing right when the world needs it most. Just as Animal Crossing New Horizons released just in time to relieve some stress during a global pandemic, the first Animal Crossing was released in 2001, not long after 9/11. I, being born and raised in New York, having lived in Manhattan in my youth before moving further out towards Long Island, was caught up in the stress and anxiety of the times. My parents were too. I will always remember my father, a man who was often staunchly against the very concept of video games, huddled up with my sister and I by the fireplace, trying excitedly to catch bitterling fish in Animal Crossing. The world of Animal Crossing was, and always has been really, an escape from the stresses of the real world. That's the beauty of the social role-playing game, the communication game, as Nintendo puts it. There's something genuinely fun, genuinely refreshing to the spirit about just talking with folks who you like and who like you. There's something very precious and rare about time spent in relaxation instead of in stress. More than ever, we are seeing greater and greater numbers of social role-playing games released that embrace the ideals that Harvest Moon and Animal Crossing established for the genre. We'll explore some of those in a future episode. I promise. But as for today's episode, I hope you've learned a little bit about the history of the social role-playing genre and taken away for yourself some understanding about what makes the genre so valuable to the landscape of gaming culture. Even if you aren't the kind of person who understands social role-playing games, I pray that you have taken away some insight into why others might enjoy the genre quite so much. And I sincerely hope that you've enjoyed the first ever episode of Moon Channel. A special thank you to my two younger darling sisters, my various music artists who have appeared in this episode, including Phobak and Harapeko. A special thank you, of course, to the Nintendo Company, and to viewers like you. Thank you. If you enjoyed today's show and would like to support my work, please consider a like, subscribe, or Patreon contribution. If you enjoyed any of the music used in today's show, please check the video description and show these artists some love. Your support keeps the moon rising. In December of 2005, my youngest sister received Animal Crossing Wild World for Christmas. She, being nearly a decade younger than myself, did not have the privilege of enjoying the original Animal Crossing when it first released. Despite her relative inexperience with video games, though, she fell utterly in love with Animal Crossing. Her favorite villager, she decided, was the lazy dog villager Biscuit, an adorable dog who bore a striking resemblance to our favorite stuffed animal, Bones. In December of 2015, 10 years and a few sequels later, Animal Crossing Amiibo cards were released. These Amiibo cards were like little collectible cards of one's favorite Animal Crossing characters that one could use to add the represented villager into one's Animal Crossing game. I discovered shortly after hearing about these cards that Biscuit was one of them. I scoured the internet for Biscuit and managed to buy a Biscuit card on eBay for my youngest sister that Christmas. She was ecstatic. Biscuit was kept in a safe place, displayed in her room as one might display a family heirloom, the crown jewel in a collection of baubles and trinkets that told the story of her life. But life goes on. My little sister would move out, go to college, graduate, and live on her own. Many of her baubles and trinkets remained at home, and yet she would take Biscuit with her. In May of 2020, not long after Animal Crossing New Horizons was released, I visited my little sister's in-game island to say hello. With social distancing orders in place, real-life in-person visits were sadly unwise and impractical. I walked around her island, admiring her collection of rare flowers and butterfly models when I, much to my surprise, ran into Biscuit. Biscuit greeted me in his normal lazy villager way, a goofy greeting and a blank expression, just as he did nearly 20 years ago when I first played Animal Crossing. The nostalgia felt like a little anchor of comfort in what seemed like, and still feels like, an ocean of stress and uncertainty. Having been carefully kept and treasured for all of those years, Biscuit made his way onto my sister's island in Animal Crossing New Horizons. And long after we stopped playing Animal Crossing New Horizons, I am certain that Biscuit will follow my little sister as well onto her next adventure. Even if I cannot watch over my little sister always, even if I cannot be there to lift her mood when she is blue, or offer her comfort when she is hurt, I am certain that Biscuit and Animal Crossing will. There are, in my humble opinion, few games indeed that can inspire that kind of deep, emotional profundity. Thank you for tuning in. Be it through Animal Crossing or otherwise, may you find the peace you seek.